YouTube, how's it going? The Goat House is back with some XFL picks. Week 2 predictions here. I'm going to make my straight up and spread picks for each game every single week. If you're new to the Goat House, we have full NFL coverage, and I did enjoy the XFL in week 1, so I thought, why not? Let's get some XFL predictions in here. But if you aren't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe to both of our channels. We have a newer channel, the Goat House Plus. There's a link down in the description in the comments. Please subscribe to both those channels, and then you'll find our Twitter link down there as well. Please give us a follow on there every single day, talking football and answering questions, and you'll find our Patreon link down below as well. But the first game is between the New York Guardians and the DC Defenders. You'll see the line of the game right there, and then we'll put the W up. I'm going to move the W over to whoever I think wins the game, and then the spread pick, I'll move to that team as well. This should be a good game. I mean, we got all the undefeated teams playing, and it's only been 1 week, but I like how everything matches up this week, in week 2. New York looked pretty damn good. They may have played the worst team in XFL, in football here, the Vipers in week 1. At least it looked that way. Maybe New York was that dominant. Matt McGloin, maybe one of the better quarterbacks. Everyone knows him. He's got some experience. He's played okay in the NFL. He could be one of the better quarterbacks in the league. And they look very good offensively and defensively, last week against the Vipers. I wish there was, just evaluating the roster, I wish there was more for New York, more talent on the, more weapons, I guess, playmakers, I should say, on that team. So I do like the New York team, but, it could be, mainly a defensive team that maybe they looked a little better than they actually are because who they played last week. But DC beat up on their opponent too. We're still trying to figure out the identities of these teams. We're still trying to figure out who's good, who's the weaker teams. But it was only week 1, so maybe guys weren't ready. Not a lot of practices, no contact practices. But DC beat up on the Seattle Dragons, and this DC Defenders team is going to throw on you. With Cardale Jones and his rocket arm, they have weapons too. At receiver, you got Ross, who dominated the AAF league, Rashad Ross, that is, and Dupree. I think we didn't see a whole bunch of him in week 1, but I think we'll start to see more of him. They don't have the strongest running game, but at the same time, their running backs could really be involved in the passing game. Presley and Pumphrey, kind of those shifty backs that can catch the ball out of the backfield. For picking picking who's going to win the game, I'm gonna take DC at home here. I'm gonna take DC at home. I think they got too much power, in the passing game, and we're still learning identities on both these teams, but. Yeah, it just looked like mainly New York, beat up on a really bad team last week. That's what it looked like, but that could, maybe it's not accurate. We're still learning these teams. And the spread pick here, man, this is tough. I'm kind of doing this as I go here. +5 for New York. I think DC wins. I think DC wins by a touchdown. I think they win by a touchdown. So the spread pick, I'm going to go with DC as well. They'll win by 6 or 7. That's calling it close. New York did look really good. Matt McGloin's going to be very solid for them. And like I said, on paper, it doesn't look like they have the best playmakers, but that could prove everyone wrong. That can prove myself wrong. The guys can just show up again this week here. So this should be a good game. DC at home. I think they win by a touchdown. That's a tough one, though. Should be a pretty good one, for the first game, at least there. We're on to the second game, and it is 2 0-1 teams, Tampa Bay Vipers, who got pretty much embarrassed with the New York Guardians last week, and then Seattle Dragons, who maybe were sticking with DC for a little bit, but then it got out of hand. Tampa Bay, from what I saw, is -2.5, so they are favored. Mark Trestman's team, in Tampa, they not the best start, and it really starts with the quarterback play. Aaron Murray is a guy that, well-known guy, a guy we expected a little more from, but it's been a while since we actually seen him really play. So that could be, knocking the rust off, could be a legitimate excuse, but he really looked just, it's harsh, but he looked pretty terrible this first week. I don't think he'll play that bad. Going forward. Again, they could use Quentin Flowers. I like Flowers. That's kind of more of the weapon quarterback, run around the bit. And they do have some weapons, mainly looking at running back position. You got former Michigan running back Devion Smith. So I think the quarterback play's got to be better. They were down 14 at one point. I didn't agree with kicking the 50-yard field goal. That was just ridiculous. We were going to get it converting it either, I guess. But, special teams was pretty much a disaster in the league, week 1. People pretty intrigued, as am I, with the new kickoff, how they're handling that. But yeah, Tampa, pretty rough outing in week 1. Seattle, they had a pretty rough outing, I guess you could say, as well. But I like the way they ran the ball. And Kenneth Farrow, who was dominating the AAF league, and Trey Williams, former A&M running back, he looked pretty impressive as well. So I think they can run the ball pretty well. I think we'll see somewhat of a low-scoring game because, there's not a whole bunch of offense in this game, and Seattle will run the ball pretty well. So to win the game, I'm going to pick Seattle, and then that means with the spread pick, I'm also taking Seattle because they're underdogs by 2.5 points. So really, they could just lose by 2 points, and you still win that spread pick. So I do like Seattle winning, but these could be the 2 worst teams. In fact, I do think these are the 2 worst teams in the league. But again, I do like Seattle's running game. So they can make some noise with that, with their running game. But we'll see. Both poor outings in week 1. But I like Seattle. I was surprised at the underdogs here from the line, I saw here. So we'll see. I got Seattle on that one. Even though it's 2 0-1 teams, I like the matchups this week. They're like even matchups from what we gathered from week 1, which isn't a whole bunch. You can't even since we know like NFL pretty well, you still can't have takeaways from week 1 of the NFL, no matter how much you know. So same thing applies here, I'd assume. Some guys knocking the rust off. It's trying to get used to everything, the playbook, everything. The next game is the Dallas Renegades versus the LA Wildcats. 2 0-1 teams, but I do think they are better than the other 0-1 teams. Well, at least one of these teams I definitely think is better, and that would be Dallas to me. They're -4.5. We didn't get to see Landry Jones, who's kind of been, the former Sooner quarterback, playing under Bob Stoops, the former Oklahoma Sooner head coach. And Landry Jones, was a very solid backup for the Steelers, been in the league for a while. Pretty interesting that he was going to be, a top pick until he came back to school for another year, and then, he ended up being drafted a little later there. But he can play. Bottom line is he can play. We didn't get to see him in week 1. I was disappointed in that. And they still kind of stuck in there, not really offensively, even though they got yards offensively, not really points-wise. So this one kind of rides on if Landry Jones plays. I'm going to say he does, but Nelson actually looked pretty well, but it was kind of weird because he threw the ball pretty well statistically, but they just couldn't get the ball in the end zone. Actually, even though Bob Stoops is probably the most known coach and the coach I trust the most in this, I kind of question the play calls in last week's games at times when they lost to the St. Louis Battlehawks. But yeah, nothing I'm worried about. He did have his backup quarterback. Even though Nelson played fine, I was actually surprised that Eric Dungy wasn't the go-to quarterback if Jones was out. Eric Dungy, I think would be pretty good in this league. His running ability, and he's got a rocket arm as well. But yeah, let's see if Landry Jones is back. I expect him to be back. They got weapons too. This team has weapons, and that we didn't really get to see much of, and maybe that has to do with Landry Jones being out. Another former Oklahoma receiver, Jeff Badgett, who is a speedster to say the least, and they tried to get him involved. They couldn't really do much of it though. I think they'll continue to try because he's kind of their main weapon there out at receiver. So I think he can be more of a factor. And then Cam Artis-Payne, who is is a well-known back. We've seen him on the Panthers for a while. They didn't really use him that much either, and you figure he would be their feature back. They do have Lance Dunbar, who is a well-known back as well and could be their feature back. But I expect a little bit more of Artis-Payne. I expect us to and none of us to really see the real Dallas, or maybe none of these teams we saw the real identity of these teams, but the main one being the Dallas Renegades. And then looking at the LA Wildcats, interesting game with them. Knopf, their quarterback, who's one of the guys I didn't really know a whole bunch about going in this. That's why I like the difference between XFL and AAF. They're a lot more well-known guys. I think the talent level was higher, but that was one of those guys I didn't really have a whole bunch on there. And honestly, this might sound crazy. I actually kind of liked what I saw from him. Maybe the stats don't look great. He incompleted a lot of passes. There was some throws that he definitely would like back, but he made some wild throws, some crazy throws when he was about to get sacked. He was pressured an insane amount. He was mic'd up. He was getting, maybe a little too much, from him, kind of getting mad at his coaches, his teammates, blaming some teammates. But you kind of like the fire. You kind of like the fire. I thought he was a smart quarterback. That's what I gathered from that. And I do think he has an arm. They just had, mainly the offensive line did not help him at all. Some coaching decisions didn't help him. They do have Elijah Hood, but they were down, so they couldn't really keep running with him, and that's a fantastic back. That could be one of the better backs in this league. Nelson Spruce looked fantastic out there, always open, sure-handed. So they're talented there. Just consistency at the quarterback position mainly, which I believe in him. And but the main thing is the offensive line. Offensive line play was really, really bad, and then the secondary play was really, really bad. They were giving up some big plays with the air downfield, plays that they could have made plays on. So it's an interesting team. I think both these teams are very interesting because I think we can see more from both these teams here. But for the straight up pick, I gotta go with Dallas. This kind of rides on Landry Jones. If he doesn't play, I'm kind of steering towards. LA there. So this is with Landry Jones playing. And then, once again, I got to go with my spread pick. We're going to put all the way over here to Dallas again. I'm riding the spread pick with the team I'm picking every time so far because I think they can win by a touchdown around there. It should be a good one, though. But again, if Landry Jones doesn't play, it's still tough. It's still tough to pick. And then the spread pick, obviously, the spread will actually change. So I guess we can revisit this maybe in the comments section. If Landry Jones isn't playing, we can keep in touch on Twitter. I'll talk about that. But I expect him to play. I like Dallas. This team can contend when they're fully healthy. LA, even though they looked a little sloppy, I wouldn't really sleep on them because I think they got big play potential. Really at quarterback, at receiver, at running back. It's just that offensive line and in the secondary is kind of what's rough there. So I wouldn't really sleep on them, but I think Dallas is the better team if fully healthy for sure. We're going on to the last game here. This should be a good one too. 2 1-0 teams. I'm surprised by the line here. A big line. The Houston Roughnecks favored by 7.5 points, playing actually home against the St. Louis Battlehawks. Both teams won. St. Louis, Jordan Ta'amu, former Ole Miss quarterback, just actually last year, 2018 season, cannon of an arm, could move around. I was surprised at how much he was moving around this game, able to run so well. The questions at Ole Miss were the accuracy issues. He had top-tier receivers and sometimes just really couldn't hit them. He had DK Metcalf, A.J. Brown, among some other guys, but looked really good. Looked pretty. That's the thing, though. He looked pretty good. Like he did. He impressed me. He impressed me on the ground and throwing. But they still didn't put up a whole bunch of points. They were beating Dallas most of the time. They kind of kept them in the game though. And then there was a comfortable spot, but they never really. It felt like they could have just done more. Dallas being without their quarterback and. Things kind of going right for St. Louis, but I felt like they could have done more. Their quarterback played great, but I felt like there should have been more points up on the board. Their defense looked really solid. Will Hill's kind of that guy, the well-known guy there in the back end and the secondary. He had a pretty big game. It's a good team. It's a good team. One of those quarterbacks I'm excited to watch is Ta'amu there. And then looking at Houston, one of the more impressive teams of the week. And P.J. Walker, who I liked a lot at tempo, just kind of undersized, and not the most accurate from the pocket. And we kind of saw that, though, that he's the underdog for being undersized, that he can move around. And then inside the pocket, he was inaccurate at times, but outside, rolling out outside the pocket, throwing the ball in the runs, he did some great things, some beautiful things out there. So I was very much impressed. He does have his weapons, though, with Sammy Coates, who, well-known guy. He needs to do a better job catching the ball, but he's a talent here. Cam Phillips, who I liked out of Virginia Tech a couple years ago, I think he didn't get drafted because of a poor 40 time, perhaps. But he, and an injury maybe, but he can play. The guy can play. And then they got some studs on defense, some standout guys. Coney Ely, who was going to be the defense MVP of that Super Bowl where the Panthers were in it and lost to the Broncos. If the Panthers won that game, he was about to be, the defense MVP of a Super Bowl. Now here he is playing for Houston. And then Edmund Robinson's a stud linebacker for them, can really do it all. So I do like this defense. This might be the team to beat here. There's a couple of them you can argue. I'm gonna go. I gotta go with I gotta go with Houston here. I really like this team. Straight up winning this game. I really like this team. I do like St. Louis as well. And in terms of the spread, this is so hard. If it's me, I'm not putting money. I'm not putting money on this because I think Houston wins right around by a touchdown. Man, again, I'm not touching this one. Definitely would not touch this one, but I'll take St. Louis. I think 6 or 7 is how much Houston wins by. For them to have to win by 8 points or more is kind of asking a lot, but it's a damn good team there. It's a damn good team. Probably the team I was most impressed with in week 1. Yeah, I'd say them, then DC probably, and then And probably New York, St. Louis, pretty evenly. I like the matchups this week. I really like the matchups. Maybe a better matchup I'm looking forward to is Houston versus DC. But again, I think Dallas can contend. And this is just all based off, me going over the rosters in week 1. So, we're going to see some surprises. But again, I think Dallas can contend for sure for the title if they're fully healthy there. But Landry Jones, already hurt scares me a little bit too because, they haven't really done anything at all yet. No like big time contact or anything in practices and limited practices for sure. So that's a little concerning. But we'll be back every single week with these picks. Really enjoyed week 1 of the XFL. Hopefully it holds up. I think it will. Something about it is just more appealing, more, there's just more energy, more entertainment than the AAF was. But I was excited about that at first too. Then it kind of cooled off. So hopefully the XFL stays. I stay excited about that. But again, like I mentioned, the AAF, there was a lot of players who were like, who is this guy? And I know my football. The XFL, like, you're going, okay, yeah, I remember this guy who was just playing in the NFL. So I think there's a lot more talent. There's even guys that just got, undrafted last year that were pretty good talents in a good draft class that are choosing to do this. And you kind of got to respect that, because they just want to play. They don't want to be a backup. They just want to play. And that's kind of, I feel like, how I would be if I was given this opportunity. Which obviously there's no chance in hell, but my point is that that's kind of how I would be. I would want to play, so I got to respect that, and I think a lot of people like that as well, and that's kind of what makes this appealing. But yeah, we'll be back every single week with this, hopefully, as long as it's popular. I think some people were requesting it, so I'm very excited to do this, very excited to watch the games, and while that is going on, we have NFL. The offseason free agency and the NFL draft is going on, so the combine's coming up. So we got that covered fully. We're excited about that. We're going to keep you covered here on our second channel, on our Twitter. So go ahead and subscribe to both those channels. Follow us on Twitter. There's a link down in the description comments for all that. So we'd really appreciate it. But that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.